The following, which you're about to see, is a sign-off from the 1960s, back when television only had a few channels. Whenever it got pretty late at night, this would come on the air right before the regularly scheduled viewing cut off. It was a patriotic anthem, which was actually full of subliminal MK Ultra, MK Naomi brainwashing tactics, developed pre-World War II, but perfected in the 40s and 50s. This was meant to not be seen with the rational eye, but to be seen with the subconscious mind. A way of tricking the American population into believing what the government wants them to believe, as well as brainwashing them. This sign-off, which will show you exactly what the government was trying to brainwash into my parents, because I'm from a younger generation with much more advanced brainwashing techniques. But unfortunately, we have some copies of the tape so we can prove that they were brainwashing the American public. And this will be interspersed with William Cooper, who I believe is a true American patriot. He wrote Behold a Pale Horse. He was killed by the American government. A SWAT team invaded his personal home, breaking through his layers of security, and assassinated him, shot him dozens of times. He did, in fact, take a couple of those assholes down with him, because he's a tough motherfucker. And why was he killed by a SWAT team, you may ask? Well, it was a SWAT team sent by the Internal Revenue Service. That's right, the IRS, because he didn't pay taxes on his book sales, because he didn't feel he had to under the United States Constitution. So these bastards, because he is so dangerous, they invaded his personal home and shot him dozens of times. Which goes to prove that you can tell if someone is legitimate and not either full of shit or organized disinformation by whether or not they are still alive. If they have been killed, they are probably telling the truth, or at least part of the truth. This goes for a lot of people in our past we could look at. Bradley Manning, tortured until he thought he was a girl. Chelsea Manning. And of course, the whole trans movement came right after that, supporting his transformation, but really it was just brainwashing mixed with torture that made this poor kid, this whistleblower, fucked up in the head. Edward Snowden, on the other hand, who has not told us anything we didn't already fucking know, walks around the streets of fucking Moscow, which has more hitmen, more assassins, more trained killers than probably any fucking city on planet Earth, and we're expected to believe he can just strut his happy ass down to a fucking computer store. Or that he can walk out of Hawaii's most incredibly sealed data processing facility, which acts as a huge node for the internet. I mean, hell, they weigh people in and out. They hit them with EMPs to flash any flash drives they might be concealing, and they have naked body scanners and full x-ray machines. And we're expected to believe, but because he had a Rubik's Cube being an obvious allusion to Saturn, that he was somehow able to sneak a flash drive out of the most secure data processing facility in the Pacific Ocean, run by the NSA. It's bullshit. It's a lie. So, here we go. 1960s sign-off proving the government uses disinformation, brainwashing, mind control tactics, and William Cooper talking about how the government fooled him into believing that extraterrestrials were real so that they could further their New World Order agenda. Have fun watching it. I love y'all, and more to follow. This will be a long fucking video.
This is is William Cooper, a man who received mainstream attention in 1994 when Rush Limbaugh read an alleged White House memo on the air calling him the most dangerous radio host in America. Maybe that's because his conspiracy classic is the underground bestseller, or perhaps it's because of the increasing popularity of his shortwave radio broadcast.
Proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real, or that have ever visited this planet, or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. And the first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. It was a dinner for Viscount Ishii of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth as I was reading this almost fell out of my chair, because this was in 1917. And he said the best way to cause all people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you. What they call UFOs, these craft that fly around the sky, are real. But they're not piloted by some little green guy from some other planet. They're owned and operated by the United States of America for one, the Soviet Union for another, probably Great Britain, Canada. I think the first really operable ones were probably manufactured in Western Canada, in the wilderness, in a place especially built to create those machines, like we created the Manhattan Project, and the same kind of secrecy surrounded it. So the technology is real. It's been kept secret, and it's been used to promote this concept that there's an alien threat to this Earth.
Well, what about all of the alien abductions?
They're not abductions. They're the results of tremendously successful and very sophisticated mind control operation, all of which has been in development. They started working on those kinds of things since before World War II. But they have perfected them. On my website, I have a patent of a machine that can read your brain waves, can recombine them in a computer and send them back to you and make you think things happened that never happened. I mean, you can't get a patent for something like that unless it really works. You have to prove it to the patent office. It works. A patent is issued. And this is just one of the things that snuck by them that hasn't, because when people invent things like this, they're sucked up by the government immediately, and then they're put behind the veil of national security. And when you do these searches in the patent office, trademark office, and in the copyright office, you come up with some real gems once in a while. That was one. Also, the congressional investigations into the intelligence community has revealed the existence of these programs, and there's no secret about it. It's documented. Project Artichoke, Project MK Ultra, MK Naomi. I could go on and on and on all day long. But that's what it is. It's not extraterrestrials coming down. The human body cannot pass through walls or roofs, or through windows that are closed. This is all the product of the imagination and people's willingness to believe something because they want it to be true. I don't know why they would want it to be true. You see, because if it were true, these are not friendly aliens. They're doing some terrible things to people. If I were to kidnap somebody, pass them up through the roof, take them somewhere, and perform operations on them, and take samples of semen and ova from their reproductive organs, and plant thoughts in their mind, and all this kind of stuff, and then bring them back, guess where I'd be right now? In prison. It's kidnapping. Why do people feel that this needs to be real? What in them says, I want to be abducted and abused and kidnapped and raped and all of this stuff against my will? Because they seem to take some kind of satisfaction that this is happening. And nobody's talking about the fact that this is a terrible thing to happen. If I were to do that to you, you wouldn't be too happy, would you? But somehow it's okay if an alien does it? I don't think so. It's all bullshit. It's a lie. Bullshit. It's a lie.
Alright guys, I would like to expand on what William Cooper said about extraterrestrials and alien abduction. He said that alien abduction was largely just mind control technology, which is true to a large extent. However, it's not a large cumbersome machine, probably like the one that he patented, or had the patents for. It's actually much smaller than that. It is nanotechnology, atomic-sized robotic computers that work together. Programmable matter, also known as quote-unquote black goo. This forms a lens, like a contact lens, over the eyes of your stereotypical gray alien. That's why they have black, penetrating eyes that seem to terrify people. Also, if you pay attention to alien abduction cases, their eyes can be used like screens to project different colors. There's a case in Australia where their eyes turn bright red. There is a popular alien abduction story where an extraterrestrial's eyes turn bright blue. If you pay attention to my channel, you would know that programmable matter, also known as black goo, can radiate blue and red light. This is exactly like your phone or your tablet whenever the screen is turned off. It appears to be black. This serves the dual purpose of being blinders for these quote-unquote gray aliens, which I will try to prove are nothing more than chimeras. Genetically modified, largely humanoid, human DNA mixed with various animals to create the appearance of something that the typical human would consider to be nothing more than an extraterrestrial from a far distant solar system. That's not the case. If you know anything about evolution and the way that life evolves, the chances are very slim that you'd have an extraterrestrial grow up through the process of evolution to evolve exactly the same kind of features that humans have. 2 legs, 2 arms, opposable fingers and toes, a nose, a mouth, eyes, a cranium, neck, vertebrate. These are humanoid features. Granted, there could be a convergent evolution or some kind of related past interference by these quote-unquote beings to influence our genetics, but I think it's much more likely, Occam's razor, that these beings, which we call gray aliens, are just genetically modified humans, chimeras, animal-human hybrids. And I believe that, just like in the case in Australia, where the red eyes were projected from the quote-unquote gray aliens whenever they were running after their abductees, or the case with the young boy who was told by the gray alien that if he was really good, he let him see the color blue, and the blue put him into an hypnotic trance that made him feel euphoric. I think that this technology, through projecting light and various electromagnetic signals, can induce different states of emotion, or even make you think that you're experiencing something you're not. This is a perceptive tool that allows people to become under the influence of these beings, which are being directed by a hive mind artificial intelligence, which you would only see as the black lenses of the quote-unquote grays. Or, if you pay attention to the ufology movement, Lloyd Pye and his Star Child skull, whenever he examined the very thin skull material, the bone, of that artifact, he found carbon nanotubes woven throughout the bone to provide extra structural integrity and durability, and also make the skull itself thinner for a larger brain capacity. CC is far and above what humans or Neanderthals once had. That being said, watch the rest of this. I'm going to go over some of the various chimeras that have been created in mainstream media to kind of prove to you that this type of thing is not only possible, it is far more likely than extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial aliens coming to abduct you for dozens and dozens of generations throughout time, at least since 1947. If these were real extraterrestrials, the limits to what they could learn from rectal probing would have been reached quite a long time ago. So, once again, more lies, more bullshit, more disinformation. Enjoy. Chimeras have been around for a long time. The mixing of multiple beasts to form this kind of monster-type creature. It is really just a combination of a whole bunch of different species. We've been doing it for a long, long time, right under your nose. And everything from bacteria to crops to full-on animal-human hybrids. Patenting life forms. They can get away with a lot of this stuff in deep underground military bases where no one from the EPA is watching them. Spider goes to make bulletproof vests by having silk mixed in with their goat milk. Also used in bridge building now. This is a real thing. Trojan gene could wipe out fish. Just one genetically modified GM fish could wipe out local populations of species if released into the wild. Plants even produce their own insecticides now. and you're eating it. Pest-resistant cotton that fend off locusts and all sorts of other little pests that may eat the roots and the stems. The amount of this genetically modified plant matter, 77% for herbicidal produced cotton. This shows how they insert a gene to make it a pesticide plant. And can even make cows with human mammary glands to produce breast milk to make cheap formula for babies in China. That cow has some nice boobs. So if you think this stuff doesn't exist, it does. Here's a mouse with a human ear, just by genetic tampering. So, do you think it might be possible that quote-unquote gray aliens are actually just genetically modified human-animal hybrids to appear like an alien for the CIA, NSA, or other elite government programs to fake an alien invasion to unite the world together? I think it's not only likely, but it probably has been going on for a long, long time. These are just pieces of art, sick art, but I think it kind of explains what's going on. Everything happens for a reason. Black eyes.
Alright, the next few videos are going to be covering what I was just talking about, the dual-sided contact lenses of programmable matter, nanotech, that projects a very strong electromagnetic wave, which induces different perceptions and states of emotions. For instance, you have green for forgetfulness, you have blue for serenity, you have red for absolute terror. So, just a quick example to show you guys, so bear with me. But I think this will prove that I'm right.
But as I sat there, I was just sort of staring at his giant, big black liquid eyes, and I felt a sharp pain on my right arm. And when I looked down, I saw there was a cut across my arm. And then I saw it heal right before my eyes, right when I was looking at it. I don't know what caused the cut. I didn't actually see a scalpel or a laser or any type of device cutting it. I just saw, felt the pain, and I saw the cut, and then I looked and I saw it heal up into a scar. And I looked back at the being, and suddenly his black eyes turned a bright, backlit blue. Very bright blue, like he had his lights almost right from his head. And it was very bizarre, but at the same time, it was beautiful. His eyes were such a wonderful, deep, lustrous, cerulean blue, and it was very tranquilizing. It was very calming. It was peaceful. It was wonderful. And I just lost myself in these eyes. And then I woke up in bed the next day, and I had the scar there, and I still have the scar.
And he gets down on his haunches and he communicates information to me. His eyes are green and they get really green lights, and the information goes right in here. I was able to feel what he was telling me, and it's that it was my time to forget everything. That someone would come along and help me remember, and then I forget everything. And then it was after that I started having the nightmares, and the fear set in.
Ellie now understood the reason for her lifetime of strange feelings. She had experienced something she couldn't understand or talk about with anyone.
Then I walked around the front of the car to where my husband was standing on the other side, and we started walking across the road together. As we were walking across the road, I looked down and I saw that the other people were getting out the car and starting to walk as well. So I was quite happy that there was other people there who were seeing the same thing that we were. And we walked up along here to where the fence is. Right out in front of us is this huge craft. I was totally awestruck. You know, it was science fiction coming to life. I felt this energy go through me. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life. It was like some sort of low-level frequency that came in waves, but it was so dense that I could actually physically feel it going through my body. And that feeling absolutely terrified me. It was like, I can't even explain the horror that I felt just feeling this. And I began screaming. The minute I did, the eyes on these things lit up and they came charging across the field. Halfway across, they split up into two groups. Some headed off down there and the rest came directly towards us. I felt this blow to my stomach, and the next thing you know, I'm back here somewhere on the grass. It literally lifted me off of my feet.
Human stem cells being injected into a pig's embryo. For the first time, scientists are seeing how our cells grow and interact inside an animal. This pig, the first known chimera.
The ultimate goal for this type of research is to whether we can use this technology to generate human T-cell organs. That's going to give us a lot of unique insights.
Right now, scientists are nowhere near that goal, but recent studies have shown how that process can work using gene editing. Scientists would delete a specific piece of an animal's DNA, so its embryo wouldn't be able to grow a heart, for example. Then they'd inject that embryo with human stem cells, which move into the void and grow a human heart. The embryo would then be put back inside the animal to develop.
The possibility of growing human cells and tissues inside animal is an exciting first step for the dream of generating tissues and organs for transplantation into humans. We're still far away.
To date, everything the researchers have done is legal, but what they're doing is highly controversial. The embryo is only being allowed to develop for 28 days. It's not allowed to be born. Bioethicists say this research raises a lot of uneasy questions.
The boundaries between what it means to be human and what it means to be non-human can become quite blurred. Also, it's not great for the animals. There's risks for them. There's no benefits for them. It may help a lot of people, but the moral status associated with this is a deep, deep, deep question.
That word, chimera, from Greek mythology is meant to elicit fear, but the scientists argue they are trying to solve a problem and save lives, not create a monster.
Americans believe the government is outright lying. The polls are unambiguous. Year after year, the same thing. In fact, if you can talk anonymously to people, even in Congress, probably 50% of members of Congress already convinced that the extraterrestrial presence explains this phenomena. Disclosure is at hand. It is very close, and the American people need to prepare themselves very soon for an announcement from our government that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet and the human race.
Why did it stop over one of the most treasured sites in Christianity?
There's a new video this morning that some say may be proof we're not alone in the universe. A UFO in the form of a bright light is seen descending over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. The video is said to be taken over the weekend. Then suddenly the light shoots up into the sky. You see it. Another video from a different angle. Here's the strobe light doing the same thing.
Alright guys, back again. I hope you enjoyed that last little segment. The next segment is going to be about disinformation. The first part I want to show you is some clues that are hidden in popular media, just right in front of your face, just proving that the same exact tactics. I'm even going to show you a reference to the 1960s sign-off, the patriotic mind control example I showed you earlier. It's going to be referenced by George W. Bush. Yeah, I'm sorry, I almost said George H.W. George W. Bush in the X-Files clip. I kind of changed some stuff to reflect, the these slight lies they throw in with a bunch of truth, which is by far the best kind of disinformation. And I'm going to show you where X-Files actually predicted 9/11 before it happened. Actually, a spinoff called The Lone Gunman. I don't know, I may just have my head in the clouds, but I think that media is the most goddamn awesome source of propaganda we've ever had, and they use it to rub things in our face, to show us what they're going to do, and to see who is smart enough to pick it up. It's kind of like a game to them. It's also, they consider it to be some kind of hidden magic, Kabbalistically, and as far as the Freemasons are concerned. The most powerful symbol is something that you see, but don't even realize you're seeing it. Only a few people can see it. So I'm going to play a little X-Files clip, and then right after that, I'm going to play an actual disinformation agent called Richard Doty, who made a man's life in Albuquerque, New Mexico, next to Kirkland Air Force Base, an absolute living hell. So we'll play you a government media propaganda that has a lot of truth in it, and then I'm going to play you an actual disinformation agent and how he treats regular American citizens for not being retarded and pointing out their obvious deception. So, enjoy.
I'm an annoyance to my superiors, a joke to my peers. They call me Spooky. Spooky Mulder. I'm the key figure in an ongoing government charade. The plot to conceal the truth about the existence of extraterrestrials.
Well, I would say that about does it, Spooky. I came to believe in the existence of extraterrestrial life and in a conspiracy inside the government to keep their existence secret. What makes you think this is a conspiracy, that the government's involved?
What makes you think it isn't? Shadow conspiracy within our own government.
Agent Mulder was ready to believe that the body was that of an extraterrestrial biological entity.
You and Mulder are the only ones who can bring it to light.
You don't honestly believe this is some kind of extraterrestrial?
If it were true, it would be confirmation of the existence of extraterrestrial life. Who are these people?
They only have one cause: deny it.
The government knows about it, and I gotta know what they're protecting. Nothing else matters to me, and this is as close as I've ever gotten to it. We fail to anticipate the unforeseen or expect the unexpected in a universe of infinite possibilities. We may find ourselves at the mercy of anyone or anything that cannot be programmed, categorized, or easily referenced.
We know it's a war game scenario that has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is it important enough to kill for? Because it's no longer a game. But if some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination? Depends on who your terrorists are. The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline? There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction for what possible gain? The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stop them against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin-pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart-bombed. I can't believe it. This is increasing our sales.
Classified studies were done at military installations F4, Groom Lake, Wright-Patterson, and Dulce. Extracting alien tissue. Tests were done on unsuspecting human subjects. Elaborately staged abductions and craft using alien technology recovered from the down saucers.
Not alien technology.
Through gene editing and forced implantation of alien embryos.
Gene editing.
Such a thing and lie about it. Own government.
Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy. The Tuskegee experiments on black men in the 30s, Henrietta Lacks.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
But it's not hard to imagine a government hiding, hoarding alien technology for 70 years at the expense of human life and the future of the planet.
Not alien.
Not only by corporate greed, but a darker objective.
The takeover of America.
And
The
then
world.
the world itself, by any means necessary, however violent, or cruel, or efficient. By severe drought, brought on by weather wars, conducted secretly using aerial contaminants and high-altitude electromagnetic waves. In a state of perpetual war. To create problem, reaction, solution scenarios to distract, enrage, and enslave American citizens at home. With tools like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, which abridge the Constitution in the name of national security. The militarization of police forces in cities across the U.S., the building of prison camps by the Federal Emergency Management Agency with no stated purpose. The corporate takeover of food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, even the military in clandestine agendas to fatten, dull, sicken, and control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity. A government preparing to use that data against you when it strikes. And the final takeover begins.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
Happening as we sit here.
It's happening all around us.
The other shoe waiting to drop.
It'll probably start on a Friday. The banks will announce a security action necessitating their computers to go offline all weekend.
Digital money will disappear.
They can just steal your money?
Followed by the detonation of strategic electromagnetic pulse bombs to knock out major grids.
What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia.
Or a simulated alien invasion using alien replica vehicles that exist and are already in use.
An alien invasion of the U.S.
Human stem cells being injected into a pig's embryo. For the first time, scientists are seeing how our cells grow and interact inside an animal. This pig, the first known chimera.
The ultimate goal for this type of research is to whether we can use this technology to generate human T-cell organs. That's going to give us a lot of unique insights.
Right now, scientists are nowhere near that goal, but recent studies have shown how that process can work using gene editing. Scientists would delete a specific piece of an animal's DNA, so its embryo wouldn't be able to grow a heart, for example. Then they'd inject that embryo with human stem cells, which move into the void and grow a human heart. The embryo would then be put back inside the animal to develop.
The possibility of growing human cells and tissues inside animal is an exciting first step for the dream of generating tissues and organs for transplantation into humans. We're still far away.
To date, everything the researchers have done is legal, but what they're doing is highly controversial. The embryo is only being allowed to develop for 28 days. It's not allowed to be born. Bioethicists say this research raises a lot of uneasy questions.
The boundaries between what it means to be human and what it means to be non-human can become quite blurred. Also, it's not great for the animals. There's risks for them. There's no benefits for them. It may help a lot of people, but the moral status associated with this is a deep, deep, deep question.
That word, chimera, from Greek mythology is meant to elicit fear, but the scientists argue they are trying to solve a problem and save lives, not create a monster.
Americans believe the government is outright lying. The polls are unambiguous. Year after year, the same thing. In fact, if you could talk anonymously to people, even in Congress, probably 50% of members of Congress already convinced that the extraterrestrial presence explains this phenomena. Disclosure is at hand. It is very close, and the American people need to prepare themselves very soon for an announcement from our government that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet and the human race.
Why did it stop over one of the most treasured sites in Christianity?
There's a new video this morning that some say may be proof we're not alone in the universe. A UFO in the form of a bright light is seen descending over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. The video is said to be taken over the weekend. Then suddenly the light shoots up into the sky. You see it. Another video from a different angle appears to show the light doing the same thing.
Well, Paul Benowitz was an electrical physicist. He had a master's degree, and he had a company that manufactured scientific instruments. But the thing was, he lived next to Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he was seeing strange lights flying around, and as he started to listen in with radio equipment he built, he heard strange signals going back and forth. And he thought that these were somehow signaled some sort of alien invasion. So he warned the Air Force about this, and they asked him to come in and brief them about it. And when he came in and briefed them, they realized that he was looking at one of or a few of many secret projects that were going on at the base at the time, which was late 70s, early 80s. And they didn't want him or anyone else to figure out what was going on there, so they kind of helped him persist in his folly and led him along a disinformation path to the point where he ended up in a mental facility for about 3 months by 1988.
I was, by 1988, knowing Bill Moore by that time, I was aware of the Benowitz case and very concerned about it. I'm curious to know, he never thought of filing a suit or anything, and yet he had plenty of evidence that would have certainly held up in court, given what was done to him.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons why that didn't happen, and probably the least important reason is that, for him, was the most important reason, was that he believed that that's what was going on and nothing could ever change his mind. Even after all this and going to the mental health facility and all that, he still believed that there was something very serious going on around that Kirtland Air Force Base, and more importantly, Dulce. And the secondary reason, which is probably more important in our eyes, is that his company, the company that he started and his son still owns, still do business with the government, so it would be like suing their contractor.
I had a feeling that might have been the main reason for it, that the family continued to be in business with the Air Force. In fact, is in business with not just the Air Force, but with the government to this day, as I recall.
Yeah, Thunder Scientific is still in the same spot right next to Kirtland Air Force Base, and they still make temperature and humidity instruments, I think, for the Air Force, the Navy, NASA. They've done some stuff for the Space Shuttle. It's not small potatoes. They do important work.
Now, you mentioned just in passing Dulce, New Mexico, on the Jicarilla Apache Indian Reservation, a place that became notorious in the UFO community based on Benowitz's claims about it being an underground base under the alien base under the Archuleta Mesa. And Richard Doty describes, you mentioned that he describes in your book quite a few artifacts that had been placed in the area in order to create the deception that there might be something there.
Yeah, well, he got the idea that there was an underground base there
Benowitz did.
Benowitz did, I'm sorry, because of the cattle mutilation phenomenon and what was going on up there at the time, which is, it was a very heavy area for cattle mutilation. I talked to Gabe Valdez, who I'm sure you know of, about this, former New Mexico State Police officer. What Doty said, and what has been confirmed by what other people have seen, I believe, was that they put props up there on the Archuleta Mesa, like old Jeeps, storage sheds, things like that, and then they took Benowitz in an Air Force helicopter and flew him over the mesa. And Doty was in Richard Doty was in the helicopter with him at least once, and showed him all these things, pointed them out, and told him he might be interested in looking into these things, and it worked because he became convinced that there was some sort of base there, and this was just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
But they did involve a series of events, sightings over Kirtland Air Force Base, as detected and filmed by a gentleman named Paul Benowitz, who had a scientific technical development company there that had government contracts. In fact, his office resided virtually at the gate of Kirtland Air Force Base, and he lived in an area of Albuquerque which overlooked a portion of the Kirtland Monzano base area, and reported seeing a craft landing and over a period of time, and reported this to people. He also knew people in the military at Kirtland, According to the documents, an investigation ensued, and there was the military took an interest in his story, and as the story developed, it began developing quite a different character. As more information emerged, Mr. Benowitz was gaining information via his computer terminal, ostensibly from an alien civilization or life form, quite extensive material, and also he was led to believe the aliens were harassing or persecuting him entering his home, and involved in all this was the account of a possible underground base or facility near Dulce, New Mexico, which has also become more known in the field in the last several years. Then another element of controversy injected into this was the suggestion that what happened to Mr. Benowitz, at least in part, was part of a manipulative government disinformation campaign. The idea being that he actually stumbled onto something that was real and pertinent and perhaps involving national security. It was felt that some kind of damage control had to ensue to ensure that either his credibility would be damaged forever, or he would essentially be negated as a credible source. And eventually the story became so obfuscated and complicated with peripheral elements that at this time I don't know if we'll ever know what really happened.
Well, Paul Benowitz was an electrical physicist. He had a master's degree, and he had a company that manufactured scientific instruments. But the thing was, he lived next to Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thunder Scientific Laboratories in Albuquerque, located right next to Kirtland Air Force Base. Richard C. Doty allegedly fed a lot of misinformation to Benowitz, which eventually caused Mr. Benowitz's mental deterioration and paranoia to the point of hospitalization. Doty's claim was that he was part of a governmental ploy to detract attention away from Benowitz's interest in pursuing military projects such as Project Starfire within the Kirtland Air Force Base. However, Mr. Benowitz may have interpreted such projects differently. The same goes for William L. Moore. It seems to me that both William L. Moore and Richard C. Doty together, or if not individually, fed disinformation to Paul Benowitz, allegedly under the delegated authority from the CIA. Paul Benowitz passed away in 2003. Benowitz's sons today operate the business but refuse to talk about their late father since they are still doing business with the Air Force. In his excellent book, Dulce Base, The Truth and Evidence from the Case Files of Gabe Valdez. Greg Valdez, middle son of the late Gabe Valdez, who was a New Mexico State Patrol officer in charge of Dulce, New Mexico for many years, brings out some significant points. He writes, the transfers of Major Ernest Edwards, who was the Kirtland Security Police Chief, and Richard C. Doty, who was with Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the transfers of both Edwards and Doty to Germany coincided with the involvement of Senator Domenici in the mystery. As his office began inquiries into the activities in Dulce to the Air Force, Richard C. Doty and Major Ernest Edwards ended up in Germany. It was also at this time that Doty retired from the Air Force, and it appears from other evidence that he was forced out of the Air Force. I'm simply reading from the Dulce Base book.
Let's take one step at a time. You're looking at Richard Doty, the professional disinformer,
trained to lie.
I'm Richard Doty. There's probably about 80% of false information being presented, about 20% of factual information. Unfortunately, the UFO community doesn't know which is which.
And that's your job to keep it that way?
That was my job before. I'm a private citizen now.
And of course, Richard Doty worked as an OSI, but Richard Doty is a self-claimed disinformant. Of course, he worked in the Kirtland Air Force Base as an OSI officer, but his claim is that he was official disinformant. And so he was interviewed in 1990. By that time, he had long left the Air Force. Anyway, this is a photo of the Manzano storage area. And he described various sightings. And of course, this is an animation of animated version of what happened at Manzano base area in 1990. It's a recreation of that incident in which security guards had seen what appeared to be a flying saucer near the Manzano storage area. And this is, of course, Richard Doty. In 1990, he had long retired or left the Air Force by then. So both Richard Doty and William Moore showed the TV crew inside the Kirtland Air Force Base. He looks very different from now. Richard C. Doty. He's presently patrol officer, state patrol officer in Grants, New Mexico, broadcast in Japan. When the Nippon Television visited Kirtland Air Force Base and guided by William Moore and apparently Richard Doty. They went to investigate the claims of Paul Benowitz, and so they went to right next to the Manzano underground storage facility area. And here you can see the former Manzano underground facility, which was, of course, closed down in 1992. But this is a very interesting location of very interesting sighting reported by Paul Benowitz and many others in the base itself as well. So a series of incidents took place in about 1980, 1981.
Culture of silence within their ranks means the public almost never hears about it. There was a time, though, not long ago, when pilots who saw UFOs did talk to anyone who would listen. They were the fighter pilots and gunners of World War II, and they saw a lot of very strange things up there. World War II was the first great air war. Weapons of mass destruction were airborne, and technology was moving forward at an unprecedented rate. Axis and Allied powers were constantly on alert for the latest secret weapon. Germany had the V-1 rocket. England had advanced radar, an unblinking eye in the sky, and America was hard at work developing the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb. And, says research scientist Richard Haynes, the belief that the other side could have developed just about anything may have concealed the largest mass UFO sighting in history.
There were sailors on ships, there were GIs on the ground in artillery battalions, there were German soldiers on the other side of the line. People from all sides of the war were involved and reported the same thing.
Pilots described them as seemingly guided balls of light. Bob Leroy, a member of the 11th Airborne in New Guinea, remembers his first sighting of the mysterious craft.
Suddenly I saw this ball about this size, that thing there about 3 feet in diameter, following this Japanese Betty bomber. And it started changing colors. I thought I had seen a new secret weapon. I had to agree with the rest of the guys because that's what they all thought it was. They didn't know any better. And nobody had ever heard of a UFO in 44.
They were spotted around the world and became known as Foo Fighters, from the French word for fire. According to Haynes, who has investigated hundreds of newspaper and eyewitness accounts, the descriptions of the Foo Fighters are disturbingly alike.
Pilots would report glowing, luminous balls of light that would come up from the ground, often orange or red, anywhere from 1 foot to 6 feet in diameter, would accelerate up to their altitude and then level off very quickly and then stay beside the airplane. They would fly either singly or in pairs or in trio or 4 objects, oftentimes in rigid formation, which is important. And all of these flight dynamics point in one way or another to a fairly high intelligent level of guidance.
Robert May was the tail gunner on a B-24 for the last 2 years of World War II. He vividly recalls a dangerous top-secret mission to drop guns and ammunition behind German lines. But it wasn't the nature of the mission that has stayed with Robert for more than a half-century. It's what he saw up there.
I spied something out there. It was kind of bright. Didn't know if it was an aircraft or what it was. I'd say it was probably traveling at a fairly decent speed, maybe 200 miles an hour, 300 miles an hour, and it was coming toward us, but it was coming in a bright light. That's what made it so odd that we could not identify it. Because we all knew exactly whatever enemy aircraft was there, we knew what it was. It was very easy because that's one of the things we learned real quick like.
The Allies thought it was the Nazis that it was the Allies. Then the fireball showed up in Japan.
And here, from the November 1944 issue of the New York Times, is a very interesting case of a B-29 flying over Japan, and the flight crew saw several Foo Fighters.
Intelligence services for both Allied and Axis forces were hard at work trying to figure out where the Foo Fighters were coming from, says Mark Birdsall of UFO Magazine.
British intelligence was interested as well. They released reports. They tried very, very hard to put a category on it, to classify it as a night fighter or an enemy bomber or something. Other than that, it proved useless. They couldn't do it.
To this day, no one has figured out what they were or who made them.
I don't think there's any way that in 1943 or 44 or 45, terrestrial technology was advanced enough to produce the kind of flight dynamics, the containment of energy, the luminous output for as long as we're talking about here.
Cherbakov's admission that he had seen a fireball under intelligent control cost him his career. For pilots around the world, this only strengthened their resolve to keep the code of silence. As a result, we are no closer to solving the Foo Fighter mystery than we were 50 years ago.
There's a possibility that Foo Fighters could have been, or still are, guided and controlled, created, produced by an advanced intelligence.
We think the little aliens with the big black eyes, those are androids. They're biological robots. They're just programmed. They're no different than us cloning sheep. They just clone a being that can travel through space, because space
or
is
some sort of an artificial intelligence thing that doesn't have a life form, right? Yeah, I've heard that idea before, and it kind of makes sense a little bit, right? I mean, if you're a living thing and you're traveling through space, obviously you have biological limitations in terms of the need for oxygen and gravitational interactions and all these different things.
Well,
that
one of the scary hallmarks of those ones, the rumor is it in the back of their head is a transmitter. So you got to wonder where it's sending shit. But at the same time, you know, I can tell you that when you look at the Bible, the angels and the demons of the Bible would be the humans and the androids.
Well, we covered the aliens. Now let's cover how they got to fly in their own little flying saucers. I'm going to cover the whole Nazi, Aryan, German connection of flying saucers in about 3 minutes. So, back in the day, mercury-based plasma harvested from all over the planet and smuggled on U-boats were brought together at an elite German underground base where they were making mercury-based plasma anti-gravitational engines that were powered with repulsing technology from Victor Schauberger. The mercury-based plasma was compressed down to 150,000 atmospheres and super cooled, and spun at a very high velocity, 250,000 RPMs, and it created a gravitational dimple that allowed the craft to lift up off the ground. This is proven by things like the Hutchison effect, as well as Victor Schauberger's repulsing technology, which was used for propulsion, and Thomas Townshend Brown's experiments in the 1950s. I'm going to throw some buzzwords at you. Look them up if you want to learn more about this. Admiral Donitz, New Schwabenland, New Berlin, Base 211, which is like the daddy of 322, the Skull and Bones. Antarctica, underwater flying saucers, Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd, Project Paperclip, Werner von Braun, the Van Allen radiation belt. God damn. Project Paperclip brought all the German scientists after the war over to America. We started working with flying saucers. The 1947 crash in Roswell was actually an experimental crash of ours with our fake aliens inside of it. We originally released it as being an extraterrestrial craft, so as to fool the Russians, so that they would think that we have alien technology, super advanced, and they'd be scared to fuck with us, even though it was just good old-fashioned German technology. Germans lived happily in their New Berlin in Antarctica. They were bombed in 1967 with a nuclear warhead from South Africa sent by Israel. They fled to Iceland. They had a lot of Icelandic passports, and Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, all the way around the world, basically. Again, the Nazis did not completely lose, but the Rothschild banking empire definitely won. The Haunebu aircraft was the large one. The Vril aircraft was the smaller one. They actually flew around inside of something called the Andromeda system, or the Andromeda machine. It was a long cigar-shaped mothercraft. Now, guess what? We have found several quote-unquote extraterrestrial cigar-shaped craft. Even Stephen Hawking is investigating, and is entering our solar system like a big poop. But these are just German crap. Okay, guys, we covered quite a bit of information today. We covered William Cooper and government disinformation. We covered extraterrestrial chimeras. We covered artificial intelligence, two-way lenses / biological telepathy mixed with a very advanced artificial intelligence with predictive algorithms and a wireless internet that's composed of electromagnetism. We covered electrogravitics using mercury-based plasma, rotating at very many RPMs, and condensed down to very, very few atmospheres. We covered the Nazi connection, the Vela incident with the nuclear bomb in Antarctica. We covered the false flag, alien invasion. We covered disinformation, Richard Doty. We covered a lot of information, even X-Files. Laying it all out to screw up a few facts. Point is, if you think you know the truth, you probably don't. And if you do, it's because you guessed right, or you're in a very, very powerful position. Unfortunately, though, guys, only way you know is if you get killed. Sorry.
Please believe me! Please believe me! In a world gone mad, only a lunatic is truly insane.